Hey everyone, tonight we're traveling back roughly 3,500 years to the sun-drenched banks of the Nile during Egypt's New Kingdom. You're about to spend one ordinary day as a scribe, one of the most respected and essential professionals in all of ancient Egypt. Ordinary meaning hours hunched over papyrus, ink-stained fingers, relentless deadlines, and the weight of preserving an entire civilization on your shoulders. Fair warning, your back will ache, your eyes will blur from squinting at hieratic script, and you'll develop a permanent crook in your writing hand. So before you settle in, take a moment to like this video and subscribe if you genuinely enjoy these historical journeys. While you're at it, drop your city and local time in the comments. It's always fascinating to see where everyone's watching from, whether you're in Melbourne at sunrise or Boston at midnight. Now find a comfortable position, maybe grab something to drink, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The first pale light of dawn filters through the high window of your modest room, painting thin stripes across the plastered mud brick walls. You stir on your woven reed mat, the linen sheet tangled around your legs from the night's restless heat. Even at this early hour, the air carries warmth, promising another scorching day along the Nile Valley. Your room is small but comfortable, befitting your status as a scribe in the service of the local temple in the pharaoh's administration. Against one wall sits a low wooden chest containing your personal possessions, a few changes of linen clothing, an extra pair of sandals, and the precious writing equipment that defines your entire existence. You rise slowly, joints protesting slightly. Your profession demands long hours sitting cross-legged on hard floors, and at 32 years old, you're beginning to feel the toll in your lower back and knees. Recent discoveries have shown that ancient Egyptian scribes often suffered from arthritis and joint problems, their skeletons bearing the unmistakable marks of their sedentary profession. Your spine shows signs of stress, your right ankle bears a flattened surface from years of crossing your legs in that distinctive scribal pose, and both kneecaps have developed small indentations. The price of literacy, you think wryly, is paid in cartilage and comfort. The room is sparsely furnished, which is typical for someone of the educated middle class. A small offering table stands in one corner, bearing a figurine of Thoth, the ibis-headed god of writing and wisdom, your patron deity. You murmur a quick prayer to him as you stand, asking for clarity of mind and steadiness of hand for the day ahead. Your wife sleeps in the adjoining room with your two young children, a boy of 7 who's just begun his own scribal training, and a daughter of 4 whose laughter fills the house each evening. You move quietly, not wanting to wake them yet. You pour water from a clay jug into a shallow basin and splash your face, the cool Nile water shocking you fully awake. The ablutions are simple but necessary. You wet your hands and wipe them over your shaved head, a style you've maintained since your own student days. Most scribes keep their heads shaved or closely cropped, both for coolness in Egypt's relentless heat and for the practical reason that it keeps lice at bay when you're spending long hours in dusty archive rooms and crowded administrative offices. You run wet fingers over your face, feeling the smooth skin. Unlike many Egyptian men who sport carefully groomed beards or go clean-shaven, you maintain a simple appearance. Your profession requires respectability, but not ostentation. You're not nobility, not a priest of the highest order, not a military commander. You're something perhaps more essential, the man who makes it all work, who turns spoken words into written permanence, who transforms the chaos of daily transactions into orderly records that will outlast every living person in this city. From a small pot, you scoop a bit of natron, the naturally occurring salt used for everything from mummification to tooth cleaning. You rub it over your teeth with your finger, grimacing at the gritty taste, but knowing it helps keep your mouth clean. The ancient Egyptians were remarkably concerned with cleanliness and personal hygiene, bathing regularly despite the labor involved in hauling water. You rinse your mouth and spit into a drainage channel that runs along the floor to the street outside. Your clothing is simple, a knee-length kilt of white linen, pleated and pressed, signifying your status above common laborers but below the wealthy elite. The linen is local, woven from flax grown in the fields surrounding your city, and it's your second best garment. Your finest kilt is reserved for temple festivals and official court appearances. You wrap the fabric around your waist and secure it with a woven belt, checking that the pleats fall correctly. Appearance matters in your profession. You represent order, precision, and the power of the written word itself. As you dress, you think about the day ahead. This morning, you're expected at the temple granary to record the latest deliveries from outlying farms. The harvest season is in full swing, and every sack of barley and emmer wheat must be counted, weighed, and documented. The pharaoh's tax collectors are rigorous, and any discrepancy in the records could mean trouble for everyone involved, from the farmers who delivered the grain to the scribes who recorded it. You've heard stories of scribes being beaten for false records, though you've also heard darker whispers of scribes who grew wealthy by deliberately miscounting and pocketing the difference. You've never been tempted. The stakes are too high, and besides, your reputation for accuracy is what keeps you employed. After the granary work, you have an appointment at the office of the vizier's representative to draft a property contract between two merchants. One is selling a small plot of land near the river, and the transaction must be documented in triplicate, one copy for each party and one for the government archives. Then, if time permits, you'll return to the temple to continue your personal project, a commission you received months ago from a wealthy family. They've hired you to create a book of the dead for their elderly patriarch, a beautifully illustrated papyrus scroll containing spells and instructions to guide his soul through the dangers of the underworld and into the paradise of the field of reeds. It's painstaking work, requiring your best calligraphy and close collaboration with an artist who paints the accompanying illustrations. The family is paying well, enough to buy new tools and perhaps even expand your house with another room. You retrieve your breakfast from a covered basket near the door, provisions your wife prepared the night before. There's a round loaf of barley bread, dense and slightly coarse, a small portion of soft cheese made from goat's milk, and 3 figs that gleam like jewels in the early light. You break the bread and eat slowly, savoring the nutty flavor of the grain. The bread is the foundation of every Egyptian meal, rich and poor alike. Some loaves are better than others, of course. Wealthy families enjoy fine wheat bread, soft and white, while laborers make do with coarser barley loaves that wear down their teeth over time. Your bread falls somewhere in between, hearty and filling without being punishing to chew. With your bread, you drink beer from a clay cup, the thick, nutritious beverage that's as fundamental to Egyptian life as the Nile itself. The beer is cloudy and substantial, more like liquid bread than the clear beverages you'd recognize in later eras. It's made from partially baked barley loaves that are crumbled, mixed with water, and left to ferment. The result is mildly alcoholic but highly nutritious, packed with vitamins and minerals. You drink beer with every meal, as does almost everyone in Egypt. Water from the Nile can make people sick, a fact the Egyptians observed long ago, even without understanding the reason, so beer and wine become the safer choices. The beer you're drinking was brewed by your wife 3 days ago, and it has a pleasant, slightly sour taste that you've grown to love. As you eat, you hear stirring from the other room. Your son appears in the doorway, rubbing sleep from his eyes. He's at that gangling age where his limbs seem too long for his body, and his shaved head makes his ears look comically large. But you see intelligence in his eyes, the same hunger for knowledge that drove you through your own brutal years of training. He's been attending the temple school for a year now, learning to form the basic signs of hieratic script, the cursive writing system that scribes use for everyday documents. Eventually, if he proves talented enough, he'll learn hieroglyphics too, the formal picture writing reserved for monuments and sacred texts. You tear off a bonbon of bread and hand it to him along with a fig. He eats hungrily, as boys always do, and you ruffle his smooth head affectionately. In him, you see the continuation of your profession, the passing of knowledge from one generation to the next. The scribal arts are often hereditary. Sons of scribes become scribes themselves, learning the trade from their fathers before entering formal school. You started teaching your boy his letters when he was 5, showing him how to hold a reed pen, how to prepare ink, how to sit in the proper cross-legged position that every scribe must master. His handwriting is still shaky, his letters crude and overlarge, but he's improving. One day, perhaps, he'll surpass you. You finish your breakfast and wipe your hands on a damp cloth. Now comes the most important part of your morning routine, preparing your tools. You move to the wooden chest and open it carefully, revealing your scribal kit, the equipment that separates you from the illiterate masses and marks you as one of Egypt's educated elite. The kit is your most valuable possession, worth more than your house, more than your furniture, more than everything else you own combined. With these tools, you can earn a living. Without them, you're just another man hoping for manual labor. First, you lift out your pallet, a rectangular piece of wood about as long as your forearm and as wide as your palm. It's made of fine sycamore, smooth and polished from years of handling. At one end are two circular depressions carved into the wood, one containing a cake of black ink, the other a cake of red ink. The black ink is made from soot mixed with gum arabic, a sticky resin that acts as a binder. You use black ink for the main body of text, for everyday writing, for the bulk of your work. The red ink is made from red ochre, a clay rich in iron oxide mixed with the same gum. Red ink serves special purposes, highlighting titles and headings, marking the beginning of new sections, noting corrections in student work, and most importantly, writing the names of dangerous entities in religious texts. When you write about demons or hostile gods, you use red ink as a protective measure, a way of containing their power. In the center of the palette, it is a slot carved lengthwise, designed to hold reed pens. You have 4 pens stored there currently, each at a different stage of use. The freshest pen has a sharp, clean point, perfect for detailed work. The others are progressively more frayed, better for broader strokes and large text. You inspect each pen carefully, running your thumb over the tips. They're made from stems of the marsh plant, Juncus maritimus, which grows prolifically along the Nile's banks. To make a pen, you cut a reed stem to the length of your hand, then trim one end at an angle and chew it gently until the fibers separate into a brush-like tip. It's a skill that takes practice. Chew too little, and the pen won't hold ink properly. Chew too much, and the whole thing falls apart in your hand. You've been making reed pens since you were 7 years old, and your fingers know the work without thinking. Beside the palette, you place a small ceramic water pot for moistening the ink cakes and a piece of cloth for wiping your pens. Then you carefully lift out your most precious materials, rolled sheets of papyrus, the paper on which your entire profession depends. Papyrus is expensive, laboriously made from the pith of the papyrus plant. The plant is harvested from marshes, and its inner stem is cut into thin strips. These strips are laid out on a flat surface, overlapping slightly, first in one direction and then perpendicular to that, creating a cross-hatched sheet. The strips are beaten or pressed together, and the plant's natural juices act as an adhesive, bonding the layers into a single sheet. When dry, the papyrus becomes a smooth, durable writing surface that can last for centuries if properly stored. You have 3 rolls of papyrus, one for today's administrative work, one for the property contract, and one for the Book of the Dead commission. The latter is the finest quality, made from the plant's innermost strips, and it costs you dearly. The family commissioning the funerary text is paying enough to cover the material costs, but you still handle it with reverence. A mistake on this papyrus would be disastrous, both financially and professionally. For practice and rough notes, you have a collection of ostraka, broken pieces of pottery, and limestone flakes that serve as cheap, disposable writing surfaces. Students use ostraka almost exclusively, covering them with wobbly, hieratic characters as they memorize the hundreds of signs necessary for basic literacy. Even now, as an experienced scribe, you use ostraka for quick calculations, for testing a pen's flow, for jotting down notes that don't need to be permanent. You arrange everything carefully in a linen bag that you'll sling over your shoulder for the walk to the temple. The palette goes in first, wrapped in a soft cloth to protect it from knocks and scrapes. Then the papyrus rolls, each in its own protective case made of reeds bound together. The water pot, sealed with a wax stopper, a small leather pouch containing extra pieces of ink in case you need to replenish your cakes. Everything has its place, its proper order. You've been carrying this kit for 25 years since you finished your training at age 7 and became a junior scribe in the temple archives. The palette has worn smooth under your hands, and the bag bears stains from 1,000 different inks. But everything still works perfectly. Your wife emerges from the back room carrying your youngest daughter on her hip. The child is still drowsy, her head resting on her mother's shoulder. Your wife is a capable woman, the daughter of a merchant, and she manages the household with the same efficiency you bring to your record keeping. She hands you a small bundle of extra bread and cheese, provisions for midday when you'll need to eat at your desk, too busy to come home. You thank her with a touch to her shoulder, a gesture of affection that's all you have time for this morning. You strap on your sandals, simple affairs made of woven papyrus reeds with leather straps. They're not fancy, but they protect your feet from the hot sand and the debris that litters the streets. A scribe must maintain a certain dignity, and walking barefoot like a farmer would diminish your status. You say farewell to your family, promising to return before dark and step out into the awakening city. The street outside your house is narrow, barely wide enough for 2 donkeys to pass each other. The houses on either side are similar to yours, mud brick structures with flat roofs where families sleep during the hottest months. The morning air is still relatively cool, though the sun is climbing rapidly, and you can already feel warmth radiating from the brick walls. The street is coming alive with activity. A woman hurries past carrying a water jug balanced on her head, likely heading to the nearest well or to the river itself. 2 young boys drive a small herd of goats, the animals bleating and trying to nibble at doorways where offerings of vegetables sit. A merchant is opening his shop, rolling up the reed mat that covered his entrance, preparing to display his goods of clay pots and woven baskets. You walk with purpose, your scribe's bag marking you as someone of importance. People nod respectfully as you pass. A scribe commands respect in Egyptian society, positioned well above common laborers, farmers, and artisans, though below priests, officials, and nobility. You don't pay taxes. You're exempt from the corvée labor that requires every Egyptian man to contribute time to royal building projects. You'll never be conscripted into the military. Your hands will never grip a plow or swing a copper pick in a quarry. Your profession is of the mind, not the body, and that distinction elevates you. The city is waking in layers. First come the bakers lighting their ovens in the pre-dawn darkness, filling the air with the smell of baking bread. Then the water carriers, the early merchants, people like yourself with work that begins at first light. Later will come the market crowds, the artisans opening their workshops, the farmers coming in from the fields with produce to sell. Later still, when the sun reaches its merciless zenith, activity will pause. People will retreat into shade, waiting out the worst of the heat. Then, as afternoon lengthens toward evening, life will resume until darkness falls and the city settles into sleep. You pass the house of another scribe, a man you trained with years ago. He works for the military, keeping track of soldier rations and weapon inventories. You see his distinctive writing kit hanging by his door and wonder briefly how his career has gone. You chose temple work and private commissions, preferring the intellectual challenge of religious texts and the satisfaction of creating something beautiful, like the books of the dead. He chose military service, attracted by the regular salary and the possibility of advancement through the Army's ranks. 2 paths from the same education, 2 different lives. The temple complex rises before you, its white limestone walls glowing in the early sunlight. The outer walls are massive, designed to impress and intimidate, covered with carved hieroglyphs recounting the deeds of pharaohs and the glory of the gods. You enter through a side gate reserved for temple staff, nodding to the guard who recognizes you. The temple grounds are already bustling with priests performing morning rituals, servants carrying supplies, and other scribes like yourself arriving for the day's work. You make your way to the granary complex, a series of large mud brick silos where grain is stored after harvest. This is where you'll spend your morning, and you're actually looking forward to it. Granary work is straightforward, almost meditative. Count the sacks, weigh them, record the amounts, verify the quality, note any discrepancies. Your hand will move steadily across the papyrus in the familiar patterns of hieratic script, and your mind can wander while your training takes over. The chief steward of the granary is already there, a rotund man with a perpetually worried expression. He oversees the physical handling of grain while you handle the intellectual task of recording it all. Together, you represent the two essential functions of Egyptian administration. One man who understands materials, another who understands symbols. He greets you warmly. You've worked together for years and you've developed an efficient rhythm. The deliveries are already arriving. Farmers from outlying villages drive donkeys laden with heavy sacks of grain, the result of their harvest tax. In Egypt, taxes aren't paid in coins or metal, but in goods. Primarily grain. The pharaoh's government assesses each farmer's land, estimates the expected yield based on that year's Nile flood, and demands approximately 20% of the harvest. It's a reasonable rate by most standards, and in good years, farmers can live comfortably after paying their dues. In bad years, when the flood is too low or too high, people go hungry. But the government maintains strategic reserves in granaries like this one, releasing grain when necessary to prevent famine. You settle into your working position, the classic scribal pose that you'll maintain for hours. You sit cross-legged on a reed mat that's been placed on a low platform, giving you a slight elevation above the dusty ground. Your palette rests across your lap, balanced on your thighs. Your papyrus roll is partially unrolled beside you, weighted at the corners with small stones to keep it from curling. Your water pot is within easy reach, and your reed pen is ready. The first farmer approaches, leading a donkey with 2 large sacks. The steward's assistants lift the sacks and weigh them on a balance saw, using standardized stone weights to ensure accuracy. The assistant calls out the amount: 12 deben of barley from the farm of Tahotep in the village of Ipu. Your hand moves smoothly, dipping your pen in water, rubbing it on the black ink cake until the tip is saturated, then flowing across the papyrus in the cursive hieratic script. The characters are quick, abbreviated versions of formal hieroglyphs, designed for speed and efficiency. Where a hieroglyph might show a detailed drawing of a bird or a loaf of bread, hieratic reduces these to simple curved lines and dots, readable to anyone trained in the script, but incomprehensible to outsiders. Your notation records the farmer's name, his village, the type of grain, the amount, and the date according to the Egyptian calendar, which divides the year into 3 seasons: inundation, emergence, and harvest. Another farmer, another load, another entry in your record. Your pen moves in a steady rhythm, dip and wipe, write and blot. The ink flows smoothly, neither too wet nor too dry. This is the meditative part of scribal work, the part where technical skill becomes almost automatic, where your mind can drift while your hands continue their trained task. You think about your son's education, wondering if he'll develop the patience this work requires. You think about the Book of the Dead you're creating, envisioning the next spell you'll copy, spell for not dying again, a crucial incantation that protects the deceased's heart during the judgment before Osiris. The sun climbs higher, and sweat begins to dampen your linen kilt. The work continues. The steward's voice, the shuffle of donkey hooves, the scrape of grain sacks, the scratch of your pen. This is the unglamorous reality of scribal life. People imagine scribes as scholars and artists, minds engaged in lofty intellectual pursuits. The reality is often this: hours of repetitive recording, creating the documentary foundation that allows Egypt's complex society to function. Without records, there's no accountability. Without accountability, there's chaos. Your work, tedious as it sometimes is, stands between order and disorder. You notice irregularities sometimes. A farmer who's delivered grain is significantly less than his assessment. Perhaps the flood was insufficient on his land, or perhaps he's hiding grain to avoid the tax. You note the discrepancy, and the steward will investigate. Another farmer delivers premium quality grain, the kernels plump and clean. You note this too. Good farmers should be recognized, their reputations enhanced by your records. Everything you write has consequences, affects lives, shapes realities beyond the papyrus. By mid-morning, you've recorded the deliveries from 15 farms. Your hand is beginning to cramp, a familiar occupational hazard. You flex your fingers, roll your wrists, adjust your position slightly. The scribal pose is efficient but punishing. Your crossed legs have gone slightly numb, your back aches from hunching over your work, and there's a persistent strain in your neck from looking down at the papyrus. This is why scribes develop those distinctive skeletal markers, why the bones of ancient Egyptian scribes show such clear evidence of their profession. Every profession has its physical cost, and this is yours. The steward calls a break, and you gratefully unfold yourself from the floor. You stand slowly, letting blood flow back into your legs, feeling the prickling sensation of circulation returning. You walk around the granary courtyard, stretching your back, rotating your shoulders. Other scribes are doing the same, a small fraternity of educated men bound by shared physical discomfort. You find a spot in the shade and unwrap the food your wife packed. The bread is still good, the cheese hasn't melted too badly in the heat. You eat slowly, washing down the food with water from a community jar. Around you, the business of the granary continues, but at a slower pace. Everyone respects the midday rest, the necessary pause when the sun becomes too fierce for sustained work. You chat briefly with another scribe, a younger man who works in the temple archives. He's complaining about a priest who keeps requesting obscure texts and then criticizing the scribe's handwriting when he delivers copies. You sympathize, sharing your own stories of difficult clients, and the conversation helps pass the break time pleasantly. This informal network of scribes is valuable. You share tips on where to buy the best papyrus, warn each other about clients who don't pay, trade gossip about appointments and opportunities. In a society where literacy is rare, the literate form a natural community. After the break, you return to the granary work. More farmers, more grain, more records. The repetition is almost hypnotic. Your hand moves with mechanical precision, each character formed exactly as you learned 25 years ago in temple school, where mistakes were punished with a rod across the shoulders and excellence was rewarded with praise from teachers who themselves had once been frightened students. The Egyptian word for teach is seba, which also means beat, and the connection was no accident. Discipline was considered essential to learning, and scribal education was notoriously harsh. You remember copying the same text over and over on ostraca, your hand cramping, your teacher leaning over your shoulder pointing out errors. The ear of a boy is on his back, went the saying. He only hears when he is beaten. You don't believe in quite that level of severity with your own son, but you do understand the need for discipline and persistence. By early afternoon, the granary work is complete. You've recorded deliveries from 32 farms, noted 3 significant discrepancies, and documented 1 exceptional harvest that the steward will report to higher authorities. You carefully roll up your papyrus, now covered with dense columns of hieratic script, and seal it with your personal seal, a small stone stamp carved with your name and title. This roll will go to the temple archives, where it will be stored with thousands of other documents, a permanent record of this day's transactions. Centuries from now, if conditions are right, someone might unearth this papyrus and puzzle over your handwriting, trying to understand the economic life of ancient Egypt. The thought is both humbling and oddly thrilling. You gather your supplies and head toward the administrative quarter of the temple complex, where the vizier's representative maintains an office. This is where you'll draft the property contract, a different kind of scribal work requiring different skills. Where granary recording demands speed and accuracy, contract writing demands clarity and legal precision. Every word must be exact, every condition clearly stated, because a contract is a binding document that can be enforced in court. Egyptian law is surprisingly sophisticated, based on precedent and tradition rather than codified statutes, and scribes who work in legal matters must know the conventions thoroughly. The vizier's representative is an older official named Amenhotep, a man who served 3 pharaohs and survived the political intrigues that ended many of his contemporaries. He's reviewing documents when you arrive, and he barely glances up as you enter. His office is impressive, larger than your entire house, with walls painted in scenes of Ma'at, the goddess of truth and justice, weighing souls against the feather of truth. It's a not-so-subtle reminder of the moral weight of the decisions made here. Two merchants are already present, the buyer and seller, and they look uncomfortable in this official setting. Most Egyptians never enter government offices, never deal directly with the bureaucracy. For major transactions like property sales, they have no choice but to engage with the literate administrative class. Without a scribe to document the sale, the transaction has no legal force, no permanence, no protection against future disputes. Amenhotep explains the situation briskly. The seller, a merchant named Hori, owns a small plot of land along the river, about 1 acre in size, roughly 2/3 of an acre. The buyer, a younger merchant named Seneb, wants to build a workshop there for his carpentry business. They've agreed on a price, 20 deben of silver, equivalent to about 400 grams of the metal. Silver serves as a unit of account in Egypt, though actual silver rarely changes hands. More likely, Seneb will pay in a combination of goods, tools, wood, furniture, perhaps some livestock. But the contract will state the price in silver for standardization. You set up your working space on a low table, unrolling a fresh section of papyrus. This will be good paper, not the rough stuff used for granary records, because legal documents must be preserved carefully and might need to be produced in court years from now. You prepare your pen, mixing your ink to the perfect consistency, neither too thick nor too thin. Amenhotep begins dictating the contract's standard opening. Year 15 of the reign of Thutmose, beloved of Ra, in the 3rd month of emergence, witnessed by Amenhotep, representative of the vizier in the service of the pharaoh. Life, prosperity, health. Your hand moves smoothly, recording the formal language that gives the document its legal authority. Every contract begins this way, anchoring the transaction in time and authority. Then come the specific terms. Hori agrees to sell, Seneb agrees to buy, the land is described by its location and boundaries, the price is stated, and the transfer is declared complete and permanent. You write carefully, forming each character with precision, using your best calligraphy. This is not the rapid hieratic of granary work, but something closer to formal script, clearer and more deliberate. When you finish, you read the entire contract aloud to ensure both parties understand and agree to its terms. Neither man can read, so your recitation is essential. They listen carefully, nodding at key points, and when you finish, both declare their agreement. Now comes the crucial part, the signing. In Egypt, documents aren't signed with written signatures, but with seal impressions. Hori presses his personal seal into soft wax at the document's end, leaving an impression that identifies him. Seneb does the same. Amenhotep adds his seal, and finally you add yours. 4 seals, 4 witnesses to this transaction. The document is now legal and binding, but you're not done yet. The contract must be made in 3 copies. 1 for Hori, 1 for Seneb, and 1 for the archives. You spend the next hour creating 2 more copies, your hand moving with mechanical precision, reproducing the text exactly 3 times. It's tedious work, but it's essential. Documents get lost, damaged, destroyed. Multiple copies ensure that evidence of the transaction survives. When you finish, your hand is truly cramping now, the muscles in your forearm tight and aching. You flex your fingers repeatedly, trying to work out the stiffness. Amenhotep inspects all 3 copies, comparing them carefully to ensure accuracy, then nods his approval. The merchants pay you directly, a small fee in grain and a piece of quality linen that your wife will appreciate. They thank you profusely, understanding that you've just made their agreement real and enforceable, transform their verbal understanding into permanent written law. As the merchants leave, Amenhotep asks about your other work. He knows you do commissions, and he mentions that his own father is aging, perhaps in need of a Book of the Dead. You discuss the possibility, careful not to appear too eager, but definitely interested. A commission from someone of Amenhotep's rank would be prestigious and profitable. You mention the quality of your work, your attention to detail, your knowledge of the proper spells and sequences. He promises to consider it, and you thank him for his time before gathering your supplies and leaving. The afternoon sun is brutal now, and you're grateful for the shade as you walk back toward the temple proper. You have a few hours before your family will expect you home, and you want to make progress on the current Book of the Dead commission. This is the work you love most, the work that connects your technical skills to something transcendent and beautiful. You head to the House of Life, the temple library and scriptorium, where religious texts are stored, copied, and created. It's a cool, dim building, deliberately positioned to minimize exposure to sunlight that would fade the precious papyri stored within. You greet the librarian, an elderly scribe who spent his entire life among texts, and he shows you to your usual working space in a quiet corner. You carefully unroll the Book of the Dead you have been working on. It's already impressive, about 6 feet long, and covered with columns of hieratic text interspersed with illustrations. The paintings are the work of an artist you hired, a skilled draftsman who can render the guys and demons with the precision required for magical texts. The images aren't merely decorative, they're functional, essential components of the spells. In Egyptian belief, words have power and images have power, and together they create a potent magical tool. Today you're working on Spell 125, perhaps the most important spell in the entire Book of the Dead, the Negative Confession, also called the Declaration of Innocence. This is the spell the deceased will recite when their heart is weighed against the feather of Maat in the Hall of Judgment. The heart must be light, unburdened by sin, to pass the test. The spell lists 42 declarations of innocence, negative statements of things the deceased has not done. I have not killed. I have not stolen. I have not lied. I have not blasphemed the gods. I have not caused pain. You copy the spell with painstaking care, forming each character perfectly. This isn't administrative hieratic, but religious script, more formal and closer to hieroglyphs. The text must be absolutely accurate. An error in a funerary spell could have disastrous consequences for the deceased soul, leaving them vulnerable to demons or unable to pass the judgment. You're not just copying text, you're creating a magical instrument that will function in the afterlife, a guidebook for navigating the dangers of the underworld. As you write, you think about the man who commissioned this scroll. He's a wealthy official, a supervisor of temple lands, now in his 60s and increasingly aware of mortality. He came to you a year ago with a generous budget and specific requests. He wanted a comprehensive Book of the Dead, not one of the abbreviated versions that some families settle for when costs are a concern. He wanted all the essential spells, beautiful illustrations, the finest papyrus. He wanted to ensure his safe passage to the afterlife with the best magical protection that wealth could buy. You've met with him several times to discuss his preferences. Some clients want particular spells included or emphasized. Some have specific fears about the afterlife that they want addressed. This man was particularly concerned about the judgment scene, so you're including multiple versions of Spell 125 and enhancing the illustration with extra detail, showing him in the Hall of Justice, his heart on one pan of the scale, the feather on the other, with Osiris enthroned in judgment and the demon Ammit waiting to devour the hearts of the wicked. The artist has already completed this illustration, and it's magnificent. The gods are rendered in perfect proportion, their bodies in profile, their eyes frontal, in the traditional Egyptian style. The colors are vibrant, deep blues made from crushed lapis lazuli, bright reds from iron oxide, yellows from orpiment, greens from malachite. These pigments are expensive, especially the blue, which must be imported from distant lands. The client is paying for quality, and you're delivering it. You work for 2 hours, lost in the familiar rhythm of copying. Your pen moves across the papyrus, dipping into ink, forming characters, building words into phrases, into spells. Your hand knows this work so well that your mind can drift, thinking about meaning and purpose. What you're creating isn't just text, it's hope. The client hopes to live forever, to join the gods in their eternal cycle, to escape the annihilation that awaits those whose hearts fail the judgment. Your work makes that hope tangible, gives it form and substance. The Egyptians believed deeply in the power of writing. Words once written become real, become true. To write someone's name preserves their existence beyond death. To destroy someone's name is to erase them from existence. You see this principle in action throughout Egyptian culture. The pharaohs who chiseled out the names of their predecessors from monuments, attempting to erase them from history. The tomb inscriptions that command visitors to speak the deceased's name aloud, thereby giving them life again. The elaborate curse formulas carved into tomb walls, using written words to protect the dead from robbers and vandals. Your profession is intimately connected to these beliefs. You're not just a record keeper or a copyist, you're a practitioner of powerful magic, a manipulator of words and symbols that have real effects in both this world and the next. When you write a contract, you make an agreement permanent and binding. When you record a name in temple registers, you preserve that person's existence for eternity. When you copy a spell from the Book of the Dead, you create a tool that will function in realms beyond human comprehension. The responsibility weighs on you, but it also thrills you. Your work matters in ways that transcend the everyday. As the afternoon wears on, other scribes come and go in the house of life, each absorbed in their own projects. One is copying a medical text, recording recipes for healing salves and magical incantations to accompany them. Another is working on a historical inscription, documenting the pharaoh's recent military campaign against rebellious territories in Nubia. A third is creating an educational text, copying out one of the classic wisdom literature pieces that students memorize, the Instructions of Ptah-hotep or the Satire of the Trades. Each scribe has their specialty, their preferred type of work, but all share the same fundamental skills and the same pride in their profession. You pause to rest your hand, flexing your fingers and massaging the cramping muscles in your forearm. The librarian brings you a cup of water, and you drink gratefully. Scribal work is physically demanding in ways that outsiders don't understand. People see a man sitting still, moving only his hand, and they think it must be easy. They don't understand the sustained concentration required, the precision of every movement, the toll of maintaining the same position for hours. Your back aches, your knees are stiff, your hand trembles slightly from fatigue, and your eyes burn from squinting at tiny characters in dim light. But you're satisfied with your day's progress. You've completed spell 125 and made excellent headway on spell 30b, the spell for not letting the heart create opposition. This spell addresses a peculiar Egyptian fear that in the judgment, one's own heart might testify against oneself, revealing secret sins and causing one to fail the test. The spell prevents this, binding the heart to silence or compelling it to speak only favorable truths. It's typically inscribed on heart scarabs, small amulets shaped like beetles that are placed on the mummy's chest. But some books of the dead include the text as well. You carefully roll up the papyrus and place it in its protective case. Tomorrow you'll continue, perhaps finishing the scroll within the week if you can maintain this pace. Then will come the final steps, reviewing the entire text for errors, coordinating with the artist to complete the remaining illustrations, and preparing the scroll for delivery. The client will inspect it carefully, though he can't read a word. He'll judge by appearance, the straightness of the lines, the evenness of the ink, the beauty of the illustrations. You're confident it will meet his standards. You've been doing this work for too long to make basic mistakes. Before leaving the house of life, you spend a few minutes browsing the shelves, looking at the accumulated wisdom of centuries. There are texts here dating back hundreds of years, some so old that even you, trained in multiple scripts, struggle to read them. The language has changed over time, and ancient forms of Egyptian are nearly as foreign to you as they would be to any modern reader. But the presence of these texts is comforting. They represent continuity, the passing of knowledge through generations, the preservation of wisdom against the erasure of time. You find a copy of the Tale of Sinuhe, one of your favorite stories, and spend a few minutes reading. It's the story of an official who flees Egypt after the pharaoh's death, fearing political persecution, and lives in exile among foreign peoples. He has adventures, gains wealth and family, but constantly yearns for Egypt. In old age, he receives the new pharaoh's forgiveness and returns home, where he's given an honorable tomb. It's a story about identity, belonging, and the Egyptian conviction that Egypt is the center of the civilized world, that life anywhere else is merely exile. You've read it dozens of times, but you never tire of it. The sun is lowering as you leave the temple complex, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. The heat is finally breaking, and the evening air is pleasant. You walk home through streets that are busy again after the midday lull. Markets are reopening. Artisans are returning to their workshops. Children are playing in the dusty lanes. The smells of cooking fill the air. Baking bread, roasting meat, the sweet scent of dates and figs. Your stomach reminds you that you haven't eaten since midday, and you quicken your pace. Your house is a welcome sight. You can hear your children's voices before you reach the door, their laughter and arguing mixing in that distinctive sibling symphony. Your daughter sees you first and runs to greet you, wrapping her small arms around your knees. You lift her up, ignoring the protest from your tired back, and carry her inside. Your wife has prepared dinner, bread and beer as always, but also a special treat tonight, roasted duck with garlic and onions. The rich smell makes your mouth water. Duck is expensive, not an everyday meal, and you wonder what the occasion is. Your wife smiles at your obvious pleasure and explains that her brother, the merchant, gave her the duck as payment for some weaving she did for him. Family networks make Egyptian society function, with goods and favors flowing between relatives in complex patterns of reciprocity. You sit together on the floor, your family arranged around a low table. The duck is delicious, the meat tender and fatty, seasoned with the sharp bite of garlic and the sweetness of onions. You tear off pieces of bread and use them to scoop up the meat and vegetables, savoring every bite. Your son tells you about his day at school, how he successfully copied an entire passage from the Kemet, the basic instructional text that all scribal students learn. His teacher only struck him once today, he adds proudly, for a minor error. You praise his progress, and you see his face light up with pleasure at your approval. Your daughter, too young for school but bright and curious, asks you to tell her a story. You're tired, but you can never refuse her. You tell her about Osiris, the god of the underworld, and how he was murdered by his jealous brother Set, and how his wife Isis searched the world for his scattered body parts and reassembled him, bringing him back to life through her powerful magic. It's a story every Egyptian child knows, the foundational myth that explains death and resurrection, the Nile's annual flooding, the pharaoh's divine nature. Your daughter listens with wide eyes, and when you finish, she asks, "Can Isis bring everyone back to life?" You explain gently that Isis restored Osiris because he was a god, but humans must rely on different magic, on the spells and rituals that scribes like her father help prepare. It's a good teaching moment, connecting your profession to the divine. After dinner, you help your wife clear the meal, carrying dishes to be washed. Then you sit with your son and review his schoolwork. He shows you his ostraka, the pottery shards covered with his practice writing. His hieratic is improving, though his characters are still shaky and sometimes poorly proportioned. You offer gentle corrections, showing him how to improve his letter formations, where his pen pressure should be lighter or heavier. He watches intently, absorbing your instruction. This is how knowledge passes from generation to generation, from master to apprentice, from father to son. You learned this way from your own father, who was also a scribe, and his father before him. It's a family tradition, a legacy of literacy in a largely illiterate world. As darkness falls, you light oil lamps, small clay dishes filled with oil and fitted with linen wicks. The flickering light pushes back the darkness, creating a cozy pool of illumination in your main room. You spend some time on personal record keeping, noting your day's earnings and expenses on a small papyrus you keep for household accounts. You've received grain from the granary work, linen from the contract drafting, and you're expecting silver when the Book of the Dead is completed. Your wife manages the household provisions carefully, trading surplus grain for other goods you need, maintaining the complex web of barter that makes Egyptian economy function. Money in the form of coins doesn't exist yet in Egypt. All transactions are based on exchange of goods, with values calculated in standard units like deben of metal, but actual metal rarely changes hands. You think about your career, taking stock as the day winds down. You're 32, established in your profession, respected by your peers and clients. You've achieved something that most Egyptians can only dream of. You've escaped the grinding physical labor that defines most people's lives. Your hands will never be scarred by hoe or pick. Your back will never be broken by carrying stones. Your life will never be shortened by mining or in distant deserts. You work with your mind, with your skills, with your knowledge. It's a privileged existence, and you're aware of your good fortune. But you also know the limits of your position. You're not wealthy. You'll never own vast estates or command workers. You're not noble, not part of the pharaoh's inner circle, not someone whose name will be remembered by history. You're a skilled professional, a member of the educated middle class, comfortable but not rich, respected but not powerful. It's enough. You have a secure profession, a good family, the satisfaction of doing work that matters. What more could you ask? You think about the scribes who've risen higher, become viziers or high priests or royal advisors. Horemheb, the famous scribe who became pharaoh, is the ultimate example. A man who started as a military record keeper and ended up ruling all of Egypt. Imhotep, the architect of the Step Pyramid, began as a scribe and became so renowned that he was eventually deified. Amenhotep, son of Hapu, was a scribe who served Pharaoh Amenhotep III and was so valued that he was given the rare honor of building his own mortuary temple. These are the legendary scribes, the ones whose names echo through history. But for every famous scribe, there are thousands like you, competent professionals who keep the system running, who create the documents that make civilization possible, whose names will be forgotten, but whose work will endure. You've made peace with that. Your legacy won't be fame, but function, not glory, but good work, not monuments, but the countless papyri you've created, the records you've kept, the contracts you've drafted, the funerary texts you've copied. If some of your work survives, if some future scholar unearths your papyri and studies your handwriting, that will be enough. Your wife settles the children for bed in the back room, and you can hear her singing them a lullaby, a gentle melody about the sun god Ra traveling through the night sky, fighting the serpent Apep, and emerging victorious at dawn. It's a song you remember from your own childhood, one that your mother sang to you and that your children will someday sing to their children. Continuity and tradition, the rhythms that make Egyptian culture so stable and enduring. You step outside for a moment, looking up at the night sky. The stars are brilliant, unobscured by any light pollution, stretching across the heavens in their familiar patterns. The Egyptians are expert astronomers, using the stars to track the year, to predict the Nile's flooding, to orient their temples and pyramids. You recognize several constellations, including Sa, Orion, which represents Osiris, and Sopdet, Sirius, whose rising marks the new year. The eternal stars, the unchanging heavens, remind you that you're part of something larger, a civilization that's already ancient and will surely endure forever. Egypt has stood for more than 1,000 years already, and surely it will stand for another 1,000 and another beyond that. How could it not? Egypt is the center of the world, blessed by the Mus, ruled by divine pharaohs, maintained by millions of people, all doing their part. Your part is small but essential, and you do it well. You return inside and prepare for sleep. You perform your evening ablutions, washing your hands and face, rinsing your mouth. You say a brief prayer to Thoth, thanking him for guiding your hand today, asking him to grant you continued skill and clarity. You check your scribal kit one more time, ensuring everything is ready for tomorrow. Your palette is clean, your pens are trimmed, your papyrus is properly rolled and stored. Tools properly maintained are tools that last, and you depend on these tools for your livelihood. You stretch out on your sleeping mat, feeling your body finally relax after the day's sustained effort. Your back aches, your hand still feels the ghost of the pen's pressure. Your eyes are heavy with fatigue. Tomorrow you'll rise and do it all again. Record grain deliveries or tax assessments, draft contracts or court documents, copy religious texts or literary works. Day after day, year after year, your hand will move across papyrus, transforming thoughts into symbols, making the invisible visible, giving permanence to the transient. This is your life, your calling, your contribution to the vast machine of Egyptian civilization. As sleep approaches, you think one more time about the Book of the Dead you're creating. You imagine your client dying someday, being mummified, being entombed with your papyrus scroll placed among his grave goods. You imagine his his soul, using your scroll as a guide, reading the spells you copied, using the magic you helped create to navigate the underworld, to pass the judgment, to achieve eternal life. Your work will outlast you, will function beyond death, will serve purposes that transcend the mortal world. That's the true power of the scribe. You create things that endure, that matter, that make a difference, not through physical strength or military conquest or political power, but through the simple, profound act of writing, of making marks on papyrus that carry meaning, that preserve knowledge, that connect the past to the present, to the future. You close your eyes and sleep takes you. Outside, the night deepens over ancient Egypt, over the Nile Valley where human civilization first flourished, over cities and temples and fields and deserts, over millions of people sleeping and waking and working and dying, all part of the great river of history that flows as steadily as the Nile itself. And tomorrow, when the sun rises again, you'll rise with it, ready to continue your work, to add your small contribution to the grand record of human existence, one pen stroke at a time. The night passes in that deep, dreamless sleep that comes from honest work and tired muscles. When dawn light next filters through your window, the cycle will begin again. Another day of recording and documenting, of preserving and creating, of being the essential link between speech and permanence, between thought and record, between the living present and the eternal past. This is what it means to be a scribe in ancient Egypt, to be the keeper of knowledge, the guardian of memory, the bridge between mortal life and immortal words. The sun will rise and you will rise, and your pen will move across papyrus, and civilization will continue its slow, steady progress, built on countless small acts of record-keeping and documentation, on the accumulated work of thousands of scribes across hundreds of generations, each doing their part to preserve and transmit the knowledge that makes a complex society possible. You are one scribe among many, one day among thousands, but your work matters. It always has, and it always will. And so ends this ordinary day in the life of an ancient Egyptian scribe. This glimpse into a world where writing was power, where literacy was privilege, where knowledge was carefully guarded and painstakingly preserved. The scribes of ancient Egypt were the foundation on which their civilization was built. And without them, we would know almost nothing about this remarkable culture that flourished for 3,000 years along the banks of the Nile. They recorded everything, the grand and the mundane, the sacred and the profane, the momentous events of pharaohs and the small transactions of commoners. And in doing so, they gave us a window into their world that remains clear even after millennia. If you've enjoyed this journey into the daily life of an ancient Egyptian scribe, please consider liking this video and subscribing to the channel for more historical deep dives. Drop a comment about what aspect of ancient Egyptian life you'd like to explore next. Perhaps a day in the life of a pyramid builder, a priestess, a merchant, or a farmer. Your support makes these videos possible, and your suggestions help shape future content. Until next time, may your own work be as enduring as the words the scribes left for us to discover.